the years, Superman has had a lot more superpowers than the average fan knows about. Some of these would show up for a single issue, and some of them made multiple appearances, but most of these oddly specific powers didn't make it into the post-crisis age. But that doesn't mean they aren't useful. This is Top 10 Nerd, and today we're looking at the top 10 most surprisingly useful Superman powers. Number 10, Super Mathematics. I'm not entirely sure how super mathematics works or what makes it different than regular math, but the ability to do complex equations on the fly could be useful for someone like Superman, and could explain how he's able to adjust his speed to match the velocity of a falling person, and catch them without seriously injuring them. This power is best remembered for a panel that shows Superman holding a jar of beans and guessing how many beans are in the jar by weighing them and calculating the number based on weight. Although in this panel he actually gets the math wrong by saying that 20 times 16 times 10 is 32,000. It's actually 3,200. I figured that out using regular math. Super Mathematics made a more recent appearance in Superman Earth 1 Issue 1, when Clark Kent visits a research lab and immediately solves a complex equation that has been baffling the scientists. Number 9, Super Weaving. Appearing in Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, number 15, this power was not actually performed by Superman, but by a distant but identical relative of his who escaped from the bottle city of Kandor. Van Zee wanted to marry Lois Lane, but decided to settle for her doppelganger, an heiress named Sylvia. In order to prove his love for her, Van Zee got her several elaborate gifts, including the wedding dress of Helen of Troy. Seeing that it was damaged, Van Zee unraveled the threads and used his super weaving to weave a new, more modern wedding dress. Now, since Superman is also Kryptonian, we can assume that he also has this ability. This could explain how Superman repairs his costume when it becomes damaged, something that comes up more often than you'd think. Of course, one could argue that super weaving is just regular weaving at super speed. Number 8, shooting a mini Superman out of your hand. When Superman temporarily lost most of his powers while investigating a crashed alien ship in Superman number 125, he gained the strange ability to shoot a miniature version of himself out of his hand. This proxy had all of Superman's classic powers, allowing him to pick up Superman's slack while he remained depowered. This is obviously silly, but undeniably useful. Instead of facing danger head-on, Superman could send this miniature version of himself to do the work for him. It's an efficient delegation. Heck, that would be useful for anyone. Imagine being able to send a mini-me out to pick up your dry cleaning. Proxy Superman only lasted for one story before dying from kryptonite exposure, thus returning Superman to his full power. Number 7, Super Ventriloquism. Another power that hasn't been seen post-crisis. Superman used to have the ability to throw his voice and talk without moving his lips. While this is impressive, what makes this power really super is that it comes with the ability to perfectly imitate anyone's voice. This ability was used pretty consistently over the years to trick criminals into acting against their own self-interest, such as in the power's first appearance in Superman number 13, when Clark and Lois were being held hostage by armed gunmen. Superman used his ventriloquism to throw his voice so that Lois and the thugs would look behind them, giving him enough time to change into his super suit, run out the door, fly around the block, come in through the window, punch out the goons, and change back into Clark Kent before Lois could turn back around. Personally, I think that if he has the speed to do all that, he could have eliminated a couple of steps from that plan, but what do I know? Superman used this ability several more times to battle evil and to gaslight Lois Lane into thinking that Krypto the Super Pup could talk. This power would be useful in a modern context, as the ability to mimic any voice could be used to open, say, voice control locks. But being Superman, he could always just rip open any door. Number 6. Super Reading. This is an ability that Superman still uses from time to time, but it isn't talked about very often. Superman has the ability to read at super speed and retain all of the information. Now, for the average person, this would be great when cramming for an exam, but the Man of Steel often uses it for more practical purposes. For example, in Superman Red Son, the Russian Superman uses his super reading in order to learn new languages in a matter of moments so that he can negotiate with his enemies in their native languages. In a more extreme example found in Action Comics Volume 2, number 12, when Lois Lane is gravely injured and Superman uses his super reading to read every medical textbook ever written in order to quickly learn how to perform life-saving surgery on Lois. This power is essentially a way to learn any skill you need in a matter of moments, so it's surprising that Superman isn't shown using it more often. But I suppose there aren't many practical skills you need when you can crush coal into diamond with your bare hands. Number 5. Time travel. In the 1978 Superman film, the Man of Steel spun the world backwards in order to turn back time and reverse the death of Lois Lane. This is the most infamous example of this, but you may be surprised to learn that this was not a power made up for the movies, and actually has precedent in the comics. Now, it's not that surprising that this ability would be useful, but what is surprising is what Clark chooses to use it for. In Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, number 20, Superman, having grown tired of Lois constantly snooping around, trying to prove that Clark Kent is the Man of Steel, decides to travel back in time to before he started working at the Daily Planet. Once back in time, he decides to instead get a job as a radio DJ, playing top 40 hits for the people of Metropolis, eventually striking up a relationship with his secretary, Liza Landis. In an ironic twist of fate, this time travel ends up making his life more difficult, as Lois still ends up meeting and becoming obsessed with Superman. Dealing with this and Liza Landis, who is also trying to prove that Clark Kent is Superman, makes Superman choose to return to his original future timeline because dealing with one double L initialed woman is easier than two. Superman is unsure if he made the right decision until Liza comes into the Daily Planet for an interview and Clark discovers that she has gained weight, leading him to think to himself, "Great Scott, that was Liza Landis, grown enormously fat through the years. Thank goodness I never married her. Whew." Yeah, real classy, Clark. Number 4. Hypnosis. One of the first questions people ask about Superman when they think they're being smart and original is, "Oh, how does no one realize that Superman is Clark Kent when all he does is disguise himself with a pair of glasses?" When asked this, I usually respond that actually he's not just wearing glasses, he's completely changing his personality and body language. And secondly, barely anyone assumes that Superman has a secret identity. They think he's just always Superman. If that doesn't end the conversation, I usually sigh and bring up the Silver Age explanation. You see, back in the day, Superman had the ability to hypnotize people with his mind, and his glasses, whose lenses were made from the window of the starship he came to Earth in, amplified this ability, hypnotizing everyone into seeing Clark as a different person than Superman. Of course, this doesn't explain why pictures of him don't give him away. Beyond protecting his identity, Superman was also able to use his hypnosis abilities offensively, such as in Action Comics number 555, when the Parasite stole his powers and Superman used his hypnotic lenses to make the villain give them back. Number 3. Tactile Telekinesis. Now, this power isn't what you might think. Superman isn't able to move things with his mind, other than in the movie Superman 4, when he used telekinetic vision to rebuild the Great Wall of China, but I am not talking about that. I'm talking about Superman's ability to telekinetically control any object he touches. Admittedly, that sounds pretty useless and confusing, but it is actually one of Superman's most important powers. Many people assume that when Superman lifts a large object, like say an airplane, the reason he doesn't punch through the plane is just because comics are silly and not particularly interested in explaining the science of how stuff works. That's where they're wrong, because comics are extremely silly and usually over-explain how stuff works. When Superman grabs a falling plane, he uses his tactile telekinesis to form a force field around the plane so that it is able to retain its structural integrity. Number 2. Shapeshifting. If you still think Clark Kent using glasses to preserve his secret identity is dumb, you're gonna lose it when you find out that he used to have the ability to shapeshift and could have just been doing that instead. Instead of using it to preserve his secret identity, Superman would use this power to impersonate other people, such as in Action Comics number 55, when Superman comes across two men about to wrestle to determine which of them will get to marry a woman named Maisie Day. When Superman finds out that one of the men has been drugged in an attempt to fix the fight, he knocks out the fighter, steals his clothes, changes his face, and wins the fight on his behalf. In an even more extreme example of this power, Superman once used this ability to impersonate an alien, showing that he is not limited to imitating humanoid features. While this is obviously useful, I feel like I have to mention again that it would be even more useful if he used it to create a better disguise for himself than the glasses. Number 1. Mind control and telepathy. In the same issue where Superman impersonated an alien from another dimension, he also displayed the ability to use telepathic will control to convince an alien to remove their interdimensional travel machine. This begs the question as to why Superman doesn't just say, use this power to make Lex Luthor decide not to be a criminal. Although there haven't been other instances of Superman using full-on mind control, his other telepathic powers have shown up here and there in older Superman comics. But their most surprising use, in my opinion, is to essentially function as caller ID, as demonstrated when Superman stared at a ringing phone and was immediately able to tell that it was Perry White calling. This isn't a problem now, but in a time before caller ID, the ability to screen your calls would be surprisingly useful for anyone, let alone the Man of Steel. Are any of these powers due for a comeback? Are you mad that the Snyder Cut didn't include a super ventriloquism sequence? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to like this video and subscribe to Top 10 Nerd.